the event that we will be promoting. Last February, I attended some training up in the Twin Cities that was an extension of the sex trafficking training that was produced, that came out of the Super Bowl. This is also a Rotary initiative to eradicate sex trafficking in Minnesota and then the world. We have identified with that over 5,000 Rotarians in Minnesota. These ambassadors in Minnesota can make a change at the state level and also in our own communities. I'm here today to invite you to a community education event that we are providing on October 25th. This will be held at the high school at 1:30 for the students, all 7th through 12th graders, and again at 7 p.m. for the community. We have invited Mission 21 from Rochester, Minnesota to be the speakers. They are volunteers that are trained on this topic to offer resources for our communities and for victims of sex trafficking. We may not think that this happens in the state of Minnesota or even our little town of Wabasha, but I assure you that it does. Sex trafficking and human trafficking is the third largest international crime industry behind illegal drugs and illegal guns. It's reported generated a profit of $32 billion every year, and over half of that comes from industrialized countries. 14% of men in Minnesota has purchased sex illegally at least once a year, but only 1% of those sex buyers get arrested. These men are typically white, professional, upper middle class that are married and have an average of 2 children of their own. In the state of Minnesota, the average age of a child that is trafficked is 13, and the youngest reported in Minnesota was 5. In 2012, there was a 12-year-old girl that received a text from a friend, so she thought, to come over to her house and hang out with her friends. She was walking to her friend's house and was picked up by a white male, was raped and sold 2 more times before letting her go. That girl lives in Rochester, Minnesota. Her attacker was caught and sent to prison in 2016 for 20 years. And that's just one example. I have a daughter that's turning 12 on Saturday. I can't imagine that happening to her. The government doesn't have enough resources for the victim advocates or public awareness in the education, and that is why Rotary has gotten involved. We would like the community to be educated and learn the warning signs for these that are vulnerable. These include foster children who fall through the cracks, fatherless children, children of sexual abuse from their homes, and just everyday children that are using social media. My ask is that we help promote this event to the church communities, the law enforcement, the medical and social worker professionals in our community. We would like everyone to attend the community event because those are the ones that usually come in contact with victims and can help prevent this from happening in our communities. But all of us need to be aware of these dangers. This may not happen at our local high school or middle school ages, but it's happening in our communities and it's happening to our children when they go off to college, and we would like them to be educated. So please join me and the Rotary to help bring awareness to eradicate sex trafficking in our own communities on October 25th. So I've gotten permission from Jim Freihammer at the high school to host one just for the students in the afternoon, and then we're going to open it up to the community at 7 p.m. I will be handing out flyers through the Rotary, the Rotarians, the business owners. We'll be putting it in the newspaper as a news release over the next couple weeks. But I would also like some assistance with, like I said, the law enforcement and the medical community to help me get it out into the community so we can have a great turnout that evening. Questions for me?
I have a question. Will this be broadcasted on our public channels for cable?
I have no idea.
Have you approached them?
I don't know how to do that here in Wabasha. But if someone could do that for me, that would be great. Or I could talk to the person that's in charge of that and I can get that done. It's a great suggestion.
I'm sure we could find out for you.
Any other questions for me?
How many presentations have you made, Julie?
Just to the Rotary, and then, and here is my second one. So I would like to make some contact with the law enforcement and the medical professionals for the next couple weeks to get this out. So this is my first step.
Okay. Thank you for all your hard work.
You're welcome. Anybody else?
Do you have additional flyers?
I do have a few. Yep.
I can put them up at our public housing and stuff.
Great. Thank you. We will get them out into the business community as well. But I work at the Edward Jones office here in town, so if anybody needs additional flyers, I'm happy to make flyers, and anybody can stop by and get them from me there.
Good, thank you. Thanks.
Thank you. All right, we're moving on to public comments, and at this time, I'd like to invite anyone who would wish to address the council for any reason. To do so, we will not have a dialogue. So identify who you are and welcome.
My name is Sharon Burke. I live at 830 Milligan, and I just wanted to address an item that's on the agenda tonight. For the past few weeks, I've been going door to door here in Wabasha to learn more about what residents like about living in our town, as well as matters of concern to them. One topic that came up was the marina lease agreement renewal. Based on what I've learned, it would make sense to issue an RFP so that other parties that might be interested in leasing the marina would have an opportunity to submit bids. The RFP process would enable the city and this council to find out what it's worth on the open market and what the going rate is for a contract of this nature. And the citizens would be assured that the council was doing its due diligence and getting the best deal for all parties involved. We know that there are individuals in this chamber who have indicated interest in the business. There must be others as well. The Wickershams, I understand, have operated their business for many years to the benefit of the city, the residents, and visitors alike. Their participation in the bidding process might even enable them to get a better deal with the city than they've had up to this point. I hope they don't, but out of fairness, we should know exactly what the market can bear. For full transparency and fairness to all concerned, I would urge the council to issue an RFP for the city marina contract. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Sharon.
Hi, my name is Brenda Pearson. I reside at 136 Bridge Avenue, and I'm here on behalf of Rotary for three things. First, I want to thank Julie for being our champion on a very important topic. So I hope that everyone in the community and the council supports her 100%. And as part of the District 5960, there's a new thing called a taproom tour, and we have one coming to town. So on October 10th, everyone in the public, 18 and over, or 21 and over, but 18 and over for Rotarians, are invited to Turning Water's Back Alley Brewing Co. on Wednesday, October 10th, 5:30 to 8:30. We will be talking about Rotary. What does Rotary do? What are some of our initiatives, both on the local level as well as on the international level, including the human sex trafficking. We will be starting a satellite group so that not everybody can meet Thursdays at noon for an hour. So I'm looking to start a satellite group, which is an extension of our local group, so that it can invite younger members, teachers, nurses, doctors, professionals that can't get away from their businesses to join us. So if you can't make it, please come see me. We'd love to have you. And lastly, Friday, October 5th, is Rotary Rose Day. We have 768 dozen roses on order. Some of them are not spoken for, so we encourage anybody from the public to stop by the bed and breakfast, or reach out to any Rotarian that you know. They're $15 a dozen, and I know that we'll at least have the lollipop version available, which is a beautiful multicolor. So thank you to all those that have supported in the past, currently support, because that is one of our largest fundraisers so that we can give back to the community. Thank you.
Thank you, Brenda. Anyone else like to address council at this time?
Good evening, Emily Duran, 230 East Main Street. Hopefully not competing with, but complementing the Rotary event on October 10th. I'd like to make council and others present aware of an event to which all are invited. I'm the current vice chair of the Heritage Preservation Commission, and in that role applied for a grant that the city was granted. The grant is called Greater Minnesota Futures. It's a pilot project funded by the state of Minnesota through the Department of Employment and Economic Development. The project aims to demonstrate the value of human-centered design as a way to generate more innovative, creative, cost-effective, and 21st century approaches to community enhancement, growth, and economic development. It focuses on communities with populations of 5,000 residents or fewer. The project leverages the community's human, built, and natural resource assets and identifies existing resources and programs to develop strategies that build upon existing strengths and our greatest potential to create livable, viable, economically thriving places that we all live in. Wabasha is the largest of the 3 cities that was awarded this grant. The other 2 are Spring Grove and, I'm blanking the third one, but we are by far the largest. The granting organization is very excited to work with Wabasha because we have a lot of work in place. We have a very well-developed comprehensive plan. We have a well-developed vision and strategy that's some years old but still very relevant. And we have opportunities that other communities of our size don't have at this current moment. So this is going to be a really exciting opportunity for people to basically align with their interest in 3 topic areas and have discussion with fellow community members. Will be facilitated by professional staff from Southeast Minnesota together. And with the outcome of this discussion, the program staff that are managing this grant will come forward with prospective priorities that Wabasha might align with. So if you've participated in the past, many years ago, in visioning work, know that this isn't digging down at that very deep level. We're moving on from that. That work was very important and very valuable, and the grant management team is very appreciative that that has occurred. What has predated this October 10th event is a steering group of about 14 community members from a variety of perspectives, including new residents and longstanding residents, new business owners and longstanding business owners, have convened to just map our many assets. So we took several hours to do that, and that was the springboard from which the grant team was able to identify what they believe are opportunities for Wabasha to move forward. So I've left flyers with council, and I'll leave additional for those in attendance on the table next to the agenda. Thank you.
Thank you, Emily. Inviting anyone else to address the council? Inviting anyone else to address the council?
Sorry about that. It just gets very long. I'm Java Jim. I live at 330, or 330 is the shop, 1603 River Drive South in Wabasha, Minnesota. And I'm here I'm not asking for anything from you, but I'd like to say thank you. And one thing that I've noticed lately, with the political climate being the way it is nationally, and also it seems to be locally, there's a lot of people that do a lot of work, and not many of us are willing to stand up and say thank you. And I'd like to say thank you, each and every one of you. I know that you have a very thankless job sometimes, having been on a commission for over 7 years. I know lots of times we didn't get thanked there. So, but the thing that I've noticed is that our community is very well run. We have really hardworking city council. Our mayor is very hardworking. We have a city administrator that really spends a lot of time here working, and we seem to be going forward in the proper direction, unlike there's other communities, and each of you can name those in our current thing. So I went around and asked a lot of our own people here and a lot of people from out of town, especially Lake City and Plainville, why in the world would you run for city office? And I come up with all kinds of different answers. Some of them have a skill level that they'd like to share with people, so they have run for a city office so they can share that skill level. Some of them have a real drive to get things done, and you've seen tonight different things coming up that they need and people to get behind it and push it forward. And our council is a very good example of how that works. And so it's interesting. The other thing that I didn't notice was that money. Nobody ever asked for, gee, I wish I got paid more. I put in, and each of you already know this, majority of the council members here and through our area put in, 8 to 10 hours a week doing city business. And I think that's an amazing situation. I did talk to our own mayor here, and I've talked to other people that have been or mayor or want to be a mayor, and you're looking at 10 to 15 hours a week, your personal time, in order to do business and get our community focused and moving forward. So the thing I noticed, though, is that it's always financed by the individual. It's not financed by me coming up and saying, gee, well, boy, Craig, you need a couple bucks to get that job done. Or, it doesn't happen. You end up you spend out of your own money for the city business. You're not reimbursed. And so I'm going to say something that's really not very pleasant. In my opinion, I feel like our council and our administration is severely underpaid. I know that I'm out in the real world, and I'll tell you up front, I had a person from my Red Wing store. I paid $30,000 a year, and she complained that she didn't get more. And this is 5 years ago. I can't imagine what I'd be paying now. And I know that our mayor, and this is public information, gets $3,000 a year. I know each and every one of you get $2,500 a year. I can't imagine anybody in the real world asking any of you to do the work that you do on the side for that much money. I mean, it's crazy. So everybody else had really good news. Me, I think that we need to definitely consider giving our council, our mayor, a raise. And you're just looking at me and you're saying, oh my God, I can't do that. We're running for office right now and people don't want to see giving yourself a raise. So I thought about that for a while, and I thought, well, how are we going to do this without looking like we need this money to, because they want to buy a new car. It's not that. It's because you guys are spending your money out of your own pocket. And so I'm trying to figure out how we could double everybody's salary. Now, the city can afford that, and it's a legal, legitimate request. The city can afford it. It's not putting any extra work on the city to pay these things. But I know that John Friedmeier would hate to go out there and say, well, I'm running for office again, and I'm going to get a double my salary raise, and boy, you can see me. And because he didn't want to say that out loud, he wouldn't want anybody to think that. None of you would. But what happens, I'm just throwing out for an idea, if somebody's running for Steve's seat right now, he's retiring, he's going to leave. So what happens if you see Steve's seat is now worth, and pick a number, I'm going to say double. Now, you can't say that Steve is running for a double because he's leaving. He's spent a lot of years in that seat working. But the new person, along with that seat comes this new raise. And Dean is looking at it, and he's saying, well, you know, I've been working hard for it, but he didn't want to say, I want a raise. But when he runs for office again, that seat is now going to get a raise automatically. Not that you ran for it, that's not the reason. So I'm taking away the guilt out of getting a raise and making it something that's very feasible and very possible without anybody looking at you and pointing their fingers out and saying, you got a raise. What were you thinking of you? It's not that. It's a way to say thank you to all of our city employees, and they put a lot of time in here. They work very hard, and they deserve the extra money. And before everybody says nobody else in the whole county makes that much money as in a place this size, that's not true. That's not true. And do we deserve it? I feel we as a community deserve to give a large thank you to each and every one of our people, our mayor, our city council people, you know, even the city administrator. He gets more crap every day of the week than the rest of us can think about. And, well, look at this, sitting here on your after hours working away. I mean, it's crazy. We need to say thank you out loud to each and every one of you on a daily basis, not because you're wonderful, but because you are wonderful. And you earned it, you deserve it, and we as a community need to say thank you in more ways than that. So thank you for your time. Sorry I rattled on a little bit.
Thank you, Java.
Thank you.
Other speakers, other individuals like to address? Yes, I see someone moving toward the podium.
Howdy. I'm new to town. My name is Kim Savage. I'm at 818 6th Street West. And I have kind of like a suggestion or a thought to think about maybe in the future. July 12th, there was a mishap down at the city marina dock where I lease a slip from the city. And there's 20 slips down there. But there was four slips that were actually broke into, or I mean, the boats were tampered with. And I've been kind of hashing over how would it be feasible to put up some lighting in the marina to deter somebody thinking about stealing from the boats that are down there and make it financially wise. And, you know, running electric and everything on the dock would be pretty spendy. But seen a commercial that these new solar lights that are attached on the back of a garage, up to 25 feet, they go off and they throw two big lanterns out. And they're very inexpensive. And I think for less than a couple $100, those could be installed. I measured them today. They're 9 feet tall right now. So if solar lights would be purchased by the city and put on those 6 poles, that whole dock would be lit up. And it would be a safety thing for people coming in late at night, too, to pull their boats into those slips. That would actually activate the lights, too, and light up the dock for them. But it would just detour somebody stealing out of the pontoons or the boats that are in those slips. And like I say, it would be probably less than a couple $100 for the equipment. And the height of the poles right now, with the water even high, detours somebody. You'd have to have a ladder if you wanted to steal it. The actual solar light, you'd actually have to carry a ladder out onto the dock, and when the lights go off, you're not going to be walking around with a ladder and then try to steal the solar lights. So I think as far as the city losing the equipment that would be installed would be minimum.
Would you make sure that we got your address and your phone number so that someone can respond to your request?
You betcha, sure. But I mean, and then I guess the only addition that I've had this thought is that not only would it be pretty minor, because it was a lot of dollars that we're taking out of these boats. Me myself, I guess I lost quite a bit. But the other thought was, would it be allowed by a citizen that leases a slip for the year, if they could install a solar light on the pole legally without having the city officer come down and say, you can't be doing that. You can't be attaching things to the city pole. So that I don't know, and that'd be maybe something to think about. But I mean, even I as a citizen, I would of the city, I would be happy to put a solar light up there to detour somebody. If this isn't something that the city could take care of, or this would be like for next year. This year's probably something to look into the future on it. But
Tony right there is our staff guy on the park board, and he'll bring that up right at the park board at the next meeting or some meeting this winter.
okay, thank you. I guess that's all.
You
I
bet.
have.
Thank you. Further comments? Going once, further comments? Inviting you to address the podium or address the council? Okay. We'll move on from public comments to council. Changes or additions to the agenda? Hearing none, motion to approve the agenda as is.
I'll make that motion.
I'll second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Passed unanimously. Mayor's presentation. It's a beautiful October out there, and Septoberfest is in full glory. And like so many times when I go to meetings out of town and mention Wabasha, they talk about the great fall festival. Well, today was one of those meetings that I attended in Rochester this afternoon. It's called the Southeastern Minnesota League of Municipalities, of which Wabasha is a member, and the annual dues, I believe, are only about $35. But this is a hard-working committee who is looking at the region and some of the issues that they talk about, we talk about, housing, healthcare costs, and different items that affect Byron, affect Spring Valley, affect Wabasha, Lake City, even Kellogg. So I will be leaving that group at the end of the year, but I hope someone here will pick up and represent Wabasha on that committee. Okay, moving on. Committee reports. Let's start with Brian.
Utilities met today, but just business as usual. Nothing to report.
Questions? John?
Port Authority met the 18th of September, 7 o'clock. Regular business and the two general items that we talked about, we had a gentleman from a hotel group come and give us a presentation about what his franchise company looks for in a small community. It was very informative, and I think it'll help us guide us going forward with maybe making decisions about how we might consider a hotel or not in this community. We also reviewed the parking study draft. I don't know if it's official yet or not, but it's rather thorough, so kudos to the group that was on it, and certainly the Planning Commission as the charging committee, I guess. So that was it.
Okay, questions? Craig?
The Planning Commission met September 11th. and I wasn't able to attend that because of an illness. They'll be meeting again on Tuesday, October 9th at 6 o'clock. And I did hear a general complaint about one of the conditional use permits we issued was for the construction at the Gherkins Mill, and just reaffirm to our staff that the construction limits on there, the time limits are no construction before 8 a.m. Monday through Friday, no construction before 10 a.m. on Saturday, no construction at all on Sunday. And so they were going to make a phone call and make sure that the owners were complying with that. And that's all I have.
That was the one before 8, right?
That was, yeah.
Yeah, that call was placed.
Thank you.
Okay, any other questions for Chad, or for Craig? Dean, anything on your mind tonight?
None.
Steve?
I'm good.
Jeff?
Good.
You're good? Okay. Mr. Chad?
I'll get through regular updates and then I'll update on the core, which I've been doing here. But we've been working on the budget. Sue has been working directly with the league on some workers' comp items that have come up where they're taking a look at our salary costs again. But we're hoping to shake that out here in the next couple weeks. On the November meeting, I think we'll have pick a date for, if you remember last year, we did that little budget workshop towards the end of November at the library, if the council would be interested in doing that again. It was kind of the last talk about things in or out. We can think about it this month and we'll put it on the agenda for November if people want to do that. Just today, we received our field days for the audit for our 2018 numbers. The police union, we've had a few meetings now. Jeff has officially joined that group. If you remember, I was asking the council and he stepped up. So Jeff from the council and Jane Glander from the police commission, we're working through we received the officer's first proposal. We countered with basically what our city staff have been getting. They are currently operating under the 2017 contract still, as they searched out a new union and got that to about the middle of the summer. So we're looking at, we were supposed to meet tonight, but they canceled on us, so we'll see where they go from there. We've had a few meetings on the bonding as well. We had representatives from DEED and from the Office of Management and Budget down here. One was down here and one was on the phone here about a week ago, and that was very informative on the whole process of getting the bonding money, drawing the money, what you can spend, what you can't spend, all that kind of stuff. So we got some people that have been long-standing employees at both the agencies to be helping us, so that'll make things pretty smooth, I'm hoping. We did receive the major traffic generator waiver request for the Corps' unloading of the existing pit across the road again like they did a few years ago. That'll be at the November 1st meeting. We're getting comments from MnDOT, the county, our city engineer, and going from there, and staff as well. So, as for the Corps, the city has continued to, with our city engineer and other consultants, we've continued to flesh out and put more data behind our proposal to the Corps. It's not final yet. Craig has been a part of that group as well, and we are looking at proofing the final copy, and then it will be sent to the Corps. Now, just so everyone has a clear idea of where we're at, we're still 2 to 3 months out from the DMMP becoming public, the draft DMMP, where it hits comment period again. So there's still plenty of time between now and basically the March day where that report got sprung on us a couple years ago. So if everything goes as planned, we're looking at probably January when the Corps will put that out. We will though, however, at the city, get a draft of it to review at the same time the other agencies at the state do, and the federal agencies. So we'll have a draft copy beforehand, and we'll have to talk about how that'll be disseminated and how we'll go from there, because the public comment period won't have officially opened yet, so. We have been requested by the Ikes to attend, the Isaac Walton League, to attend a meeting on October 15th, I believe. There'll be some things to share. I don't know how much at that point, based on where we're gonna be at with the proposal and where it is at with the Corps. I know that the Corps has been invited, and so has several other agencies as of now. Craig, do you know of any specifics on that? I know the Corps, they called me today on it.
The Corps and the DNR have been invited. I don't
Okay.
know if they've accepted, but it's gonna be at the VFW at 7 o'clock on October 15th.
Okay, yep. So, we are submitting our proposal, like I said, hopefully the first part of next week. No guarantees on that. The Port Authority, this is around the port idea that we've discussed, so. Any questions?
Thank you, Chad. Tony?
Mayor, I'm beginning to think that you don't like me. Keep skipping.
Tony, I don't know how old you are, but if you live as long as I do, you're gonna find that you forget a few things.
I got you. Park Board did not meet last month. Street Commission met today. We had a request from a business for no overnight parking. After talking about it, we decided that was not fair to the other business owners in town to grant that request, so it was denied. November meeting changed, as we did with the city council meeting for Thursday the 1st. We did update our fee schedule for 2019, and Chad, I think there's other people on there, so do we want to circulate that between the other agencies before we take it to city council for approval, the fee schedule?
Yes, yeah, we'll look at all those
Do it in
in
January?
addition to yours, yep.
Okay. We did have a request to look at the traffic control at Rustic Lane and Washington Avenue. Washington Avenue coming up from the marina, there's a yield sign there, and some people are not obeying the sign. And then at the same time, some of the traffic coming down that long straight of Rustic has some good speed to it, so I'm gonna talk to our chief probably tomorrow and figure out if they can kind of watch the area for a while and possibly the radar sign to make people aware. We did have a sidewalk removal request from a residence on 4th Street West. And basically, for some of you that don't know, what we do is we look at the sidewalk that is at that property, and if it's connecting with other sidewalks, we make them keep it. We deny the request. If it's a hodgepodge of sidewalk here, not there, sidewalk here, there's no real connectivity to it. So as far as snow removal and the upkeep, it kind of outweighs the benefit of having anything there. So the sidewalk was not connected on either side, so we gave them approval to remove it. That was it for Street Commission. I did want to give an update on the riprap project. I filed a permit for the DNR, paid the fee. Doesn't seem to be a problem, but it's going to be a little bit longer process. Could be 90 days, 120 days before we hear back. So I talked with Chad, and this project might get moved to 2019. It's not a big issue, just moving funds for that. So I think that is it.
Tony, before you sit down, I just want to say thank you for your update. I think we got it within the last 5 to 10 days. And what I like to see in there is you said, there's a little time to take a breath right now.
Yeah,
So,
finally.
yeah,
Probably like a week.
been a busy summer.
Yeah. We are going to start removing ash trees too, so I'm getting pricing on a brush grinder, and we're going to pick a spot in town and start tearing at it. So I'll probably send out, get a letter in the paper and.
Can I make a comment? So, in one of my other lives, I'm a school bus driver, and the school doesn't drop kids at each individual door. The school drops them at a place where they all congregate from, where there's a number of kids. So what I see in the wintertime, I see the kids, I drop them at the appointed spot, and then in the wintertime especially, they have no place to walk except in the street because snow is covering all of the grass, and there is no sidewalk that is shoveled. There's no sidewalk, period.
Yeah.
So the only place they're walking is in the street, and then I have to drive around them while other traffic is in the street. So one of the thoughts I have is maybe on some of these sidewalks that aren't connected, maybe they should be connected. Maybe we should have that, because I think that's what kind of makes a community is a place for pedestrians to walk, especially kids, because then they're out of the traffic. Adults, they're probably fine, but that's just to consider. That's just something I see, so I just wanted to bring it up.
We did have the same discussion when we did the 2013 street project, and I'm not gonna say all residents, but probably 90% said no sidewalks, kids can use the street. So that's kind of what happened, but I know what you're talking about, yep.
Thank you, Tony.
Totally agree with that.
Don't forget Gene Jensen.
Jeff?
Ambulance. No, the ambulance.
Okay, call him.
Oh, Gene. Update.
Sorry.
No problem.
Ambulance Commission will be meeting next Thursday, so we'll get probably more information for next month. There's been a lot of conflict of interest, or not conflict, but conflicts in schedules for that, getting that done. But just got a couple numbers from our billing agency. Last month we only had 27 calls of service, but for the year to date, we're at 529 calls. We're on schedule for about 700 this year. That's with right now it's 451 transports. So numbers are actually up this year, probably 10%. So we had a leader, Amanda and myself, had a leadership conference a couple weeks ago. Went there, learned quite a bit, brought back a lot to our staff, a couple different things that we're going to be doing and going forward there. So other than that, we're out there doing a campaign right now for Stop the Bleed in the community. We've been around to some businesses, trying to get these kits together. We're donating the kits, to these businesses, free of charge. We're putting them together at the ambulance. And what it is, it's a campaign. So if there's a major bleed, say like at the Eagle Center, somebody falls, cuts themselves, we can get that, they can grab that kit and administer a tourniquet and get some gauze packed into that wound right away. So that way when we get there, the bleeding is stopped and somewhat controlled. So as of right now, we have, how many? 16 kits to deploy. So it's a pretty good campaign. It's actually a nationwide campaign. So we're going forward with that. Other than that, I just got some other things to talk about further on down on the agenda with the monitors. So any questions? Thank you.
Thank you, Gene. Okay, now moving on to the consent agenda, which tonight includes approving the 8/23 budget workshop minutes and the 9/4 regular minutes, resolution assessing unpaid utility charges to a Wabasha location, temporary on-sale liquor license application for the St. Felix Church, temporary on-sale liquor license application for RJAC, 2019 Wabasha County Maintenance Agreement, and the warrants. Motion to approve the consent agenda?
So move.
I'll second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Passed unanimously. Moving on, no public hearing tonight. General business. 2019 Project Street Feasibility Report and Resolution receiving report and calling hearing on improvements.
We have Brian here. He's connected to a PowerPoint up on the screen. Tony and I met with Brian this week to preview this and tweak a few things there and there and go forward with what we have for the 2019 project as we sit here today. And make sure you talk about our pending grant application also too.
Got it.
So people know what's out there. Perfect.
So, Mr. Mayor, council members, at your August meeting, you authorized the preparation of a preliminary engineering report to further look at the details of the 2019 street improvement project. So, in your packet is the detailed report. I'm sure you all read it and shared it with your family members and pored over it. I put together a little brief presentation in case you didn't do that, so you can be aware of what's in the report. So, project area, there are several streets that are being looked at for potential pavement improvements this year. I won't read through the whole list, but the map here shows mostly they're on the east side of town here, with the exception of Arch Avenue and 10th Street that are more on the west side. But these are the streets that we're looking at for basically surfacing improvements. We did do pavement ratings. City staff has done pavement ratings, and our staff has done pavement ratings the last several years. Most recently this year, we use a method called the PACER method, which is a 1 through 10 scale that looks at the condition of the streets. And then based on that rating, there are typical treatments that are recommended based on the condition of the street. A rating of 10 would be a brand new street. A rating of 1 would be a completely failed street, almost returning to gravel. The typical treatments that are recommended based on those ratings, if it's between a 7 and a 10, it's a street that's in relatively good condition, and those are the streets that you want to continue your typical pavement maintenance, crack sealing and chip sealing type treatments to continue to extend the life of those streets. And I know Tony's done a good job of identifying those streets throughout town, and you've done a pretty regular project using maintenance dollars for those types of streets. Anything with a rating between 4 and 6, you're starting to lose effectiveness in doing those crack sealing and chip sealing treatments. So these are the streets that we'd be targeting for more of a mill and overlay type improvement, which is what we're talking about with this project. Streets between a 1 and 3 rating, those are the streets where the pavement has gotten bad enough that really a mill and overlay isn't the right solution anymore. Those are the streets where you want to look at something more extensive, either full reconstruction like you did on your 2013 project, or there are some other options if you're not ready to dive into that full reconstruction stage. We do have one street that's sort of in this category where we're looking at more of a reclaim and pave. So these are the identified streets and the ratings that are associated with them. You can see most of them are rated at that 4 or 5, right in that, between 4 and 6, right in that wheelhouse for a mill and overlay. There's the one street that's in that category of 3, and that's where we're looking at. We're going to be looking at a little different treatment with that, a little bit more extensive. So this is actually how those streets were identified. The ratings were done over the past few years, and then Tony drives the streets all the time, and then maintenance staff does, and they're more familiar with the streets than we are even. So using the ratings and then staff input, these are the streets that were identified as needing improvement for this project. So these are just some photos that were included in the report, and you can see in the photos you've got some cracking that's taking place in the street, more extensive on some streets than others. Happened to get out and take these pictures right after a rainstorm, so you'll see we've got some puddles that are happening in some of these streets, and that'll come up later in the presentation here when we talk about what the expectations are with a mill and overlay with respect to getting rid of some of those puddles and how realistic that is. Some of the streets have asphalt curb and gutter, or asphalt gutter or curb, excuse me. Some have, a couple of the streets have concrete curb and gutter. This shows some of the asphalt curb that sometimes exists and sometimes has been chewed up by the plow and doesn't really exist anymore, but was certainly intended to be there. These are a couple photos showing the concrete curb that exists. Drainage in the project area. There's not a lot of storm sewer in the project area, with the exception of Pierce Avenue and 12th Street. Mostly the drainage flows along the streets and flows to another street where there might be storm sewer, but there really isn't a lot of storm sewer in the project area. And as you can see, there's some puddling that takes place. Sanitary sewer. We also looked at the underground utilities, sanitary sewer and water main. In the project area, a lot of these streets don't have sanitary sewer under them because the lots are served by the side streets. But the streets that do have sanitary, it ranges in size from 6 to 12 inch. The age is anywhere from 30 years old to 100 years old based on some research that we did from plans. And I think council saw that back in 2017 when we kind of looked at your capital improvement citywide infrastructure analysis. Some of those pipes you do have infiltration issues because it's that old clay pipe that leaks. Some of it has root intrusion issues and some structural issues. We did identify with the help of city staff. Pat is pretty familiar with where they have issues with some of these sewer mains, and there were 2 areas within the project where the sewer mains did have issues. And those will be addressed. Utility Commission has actually already authorized a separate project to do some pipelining to address those problem areas. That'll be separate from this project because you don't typically assess for those improvements. So we did look at the sanitary sewer under the streets. Water main, again, under these streets, not all the streets have a water main, but where it does exist, it ranges in age from 60 to 100 years old, so similar to your 2014 and 2016 projects where you have some old water main under the streets. Some of it's cast iron, most of it's cast iron, some is ductile iron. It's outlived its useful life, but we did look at records that staff has taken. We've been mapping your water main breaks that you've had for the past I think 6 or 8 years. And you haven't had a lot of water main breaks in the project area, so even though that water main is old, it hasn't given you a lot of trouble yet. So the decision was made that we wouldn't look at doing any water main improvements with this project, and we'll talk a little bit more about that later. This map is probably pretty impossible to read, but in your report it does show where the utilities exist under the streets, and they're color-coded so you can see which streets have sewer and which have water under them and where storm sewer is. So what's the proposed project? The majority of the streets we will mill. So we mill about 2 inches off the entire surface. We mill out that existing asphalt curb that exists. If it's got concrete curb, we mill between the curbs and leave the concrete curb alone. And then we'll put down 2 inches of new asphalt after we mill that down. The one street that we did identify, I think it was Rustic Lane, where the pavement is in such a condition that we don't believe an overlay would hold up very well. That one we're looking at doing a reclaim and pave. And the difference between a mill and overlay and a reclaim and pave is that when we reclaim, we basically grind up all the existing asphalt, scrape it off, use it as gravel, and then put 4 inches of new asphalt on top. So it's a little bit more extensive treatment. So we'd be looking at doing that on Rustic Lane and you pronounce it Augustine or Augustine? Got to get this right before we get too far into the project. Does anybody know? I'm going with,
What day of the week it is.
I'm going with Augustine then. So we do that on Augustine and Rustic, and then actually on 8th Street and Allegheny Avenue, not so much because, and that's by the Dollar General store, not so much because of the pavement condition there, but because we do want to look at raising the grade of that street up about 2 feet, because as you know, down at the corner there, it gets pretty low, and we want to try to raise that street up a bit to help it, keep it from flooding quite so often there. Other work that would happen in the project, we would look at any areas where the pavement has deteriorated past the point, in spot areas where we might need to do a full depth patch there. So we might do some more extensive patching in some areas as we get into the detailed design here. Again, new asphalt curb where it currently exists, and then where you have concrete curb, we'd be looking at areas where the curb might be cracked and settled, and we might do some spot repair of that curb, but not an extensive replacement of the concrete curb. Expected life, what do you expect out of this project? So for a mill and overlay, you typically expect that to last about 10 to 15 years, and you might be able to extend that to 20 to 25 years, provided you're continuing to do that regular maintenance with crack sealing and chip sealing, assuming that you've got a stable underlying base. You're blessed with relatively sandy soils here in Wabasha, so believe it or not, you'll get more life out of your pavements than in some of the other communities that have clay soils and not as stable a base under those roads. On the reclaim and pave, you'll get a little extra life out of that, again, because we're putting all new asphalt down, so maybe 20 to 25 years, possibly 30 to 35 with proper maintenance, and again, that stable base. Some of the life expectancy, again, is dependent on what your tolerance level is at the end for how pothole-ridden the streets get. So sometimes you can go a good 5 years with, it's getting bad, but it isn't quite gone yet, and so there's a little bit of wiggle room in those life expectancies. We do like to note that on these mill and overlay projects, you will get cracking that comes back through the street 1 to 2 years afterwards. So that's normal, it's to be expected, so the expectation should not be that that's a brand new surface that won't have cracks in it the next year. It will have cracks, and it'll have to be a part of your regular maintenance program where you go back in and seal those cracks. So this map just shows the type of work that'll be done on all the streets. The light blue is that reclaim and pave, and the orange is the mill and overlay. Storm drainage. We are looking at the possibility of doing some storm drainage improvements along that stretch of Augustine and Rustic Lane. We're not sure exactly why that street failed as quickly as it did, or more severely than some of the other streets. And so when we get into the design here, we'll probably do some soil borings there, some shallow soil borings to see what the underlying soil is like. If we feel that it's wet, we might put in a subdrain to help extend the life of that pavement. Subdrain does help with that. So if we do have a cost in the project to do that, if during design we feel that that's an appropriate measure. If we do put in a subdrain, we oftentimes stub out sump pump services for residents to connect up to. Also along 10th Street, that project, we hope to be able to surface drain that to the east, to the southeast, as the road currently does, but we did include a little cost for storm sewer there if for some reason when we look at the grades we aren't able to get that curb to drain. Again, bird baths, they can't be solved with a mill and overlay project, so some of those pictures where you see water standing, we may be able to move the water off the street over to the edge of the street. We may push a bird bath from one spot to the other, but it's not realistic to expect that all of those bird baths will go away. We try to push them to the edge of the street, but we can't eliminate them.
If you put a crown on there and you can get it to the edge of the street?
Yep.
But you can't improve the grade of the street.
Right, because we're not rebuilding the streets, so getting the water to run down the street, it is what it is. So there may be some that get eliminated sort of accidentally as a part of the project, but I know we get complaints, we've gotten complaints in the past on the 2014 and 2016 project that, hey, there's a puddle in the street and it's brand new. Well, unfortunately, this type of project, you just can't eliminate all of those. We'll do the best we can, but there shouldn't be an expectation that all of the bird baths will go away. Again, I mentioned with the sanitary sewer, we're not proposing any improvements as a part of the assessment project. We will install new castings in the street to make them watertight. That's on the manholes. And then we'll address those problem areas through a separate CIPP or a pipelining project that the Utility Commission's already authorized.
How much tolerance, when I drive over some of the overlays, they didn't raise the manholes, so you end up with a large bump there. What's the tolerance on that? When do you decide you should put another adjusting ring in there?
So the specification usually says that we want anywhere between a quarter and a half inch. The casting should be a quarter to a half inch below the pavement. So it's designed to be a little bit of a bump because the guys plowing snow don't like it when the casting's up a little bit. It's a good wake-up call at 3 o'clock in the morning when you're plowing the street and you hit one of those castings. It wakes you up. So, but that's the spec. And then what happens is after you install it, a little bit less on the mill and overlays, but there's a little bit of settlement that can happen when you do that. So things change over time. But the goal is to get them a little bit below the pavement.
A little bit being?
Quarter to a half inch is the goal.
Quarter to a half inch.
Water main, again, no proposed improvements for water main other than raising and adjusting the valves to the new grade. If we did include water main improvements, you'd basically be looking at a full reconstruction project, which would be extensive because really the only effective way to replace the water main is to dig it up and to do all the services. And that's not in your budget. And because you haven't had a lot of breaks, water main breaks yet in this project area, it wasn't deemed necessary at this point. But we do want to note that by the end of that pavement life that we talked about with the mill and overlay, some of this water main could be 80 to 125 years old. If you haven't had water main breaks yet, it's likely that you will in that pavement life. So again, expect that you may have to dig into some of this new pavement to repair water main if it breaks, because it's not new. And that'd be the same as you've had with the 2014 and 2016 project. Estimated costs, total project costs, right around 1.3 million. How will that be financed? It'll be financed partially through assessments, as you did with the 2014 and 2016 project. City does have an improvement policy, a local improvement policy. In that policy, this would be considered a Class E improvement. And based on that, the street improvements would be assessed to the benefiting properties on a unit basis. So 20% of the project cost is what you've done in the past, and we would assume you would still do that. That's the minimum you can assess, or the minimum you can assess based on being able to bond for the project, if that's what you chose to do. Your policy says that you use a equivalent residential unit, so single-family residences are one unit, and then larger properties and commercial properties, there's a front footage calculation to determine how many equivalent residential units there are. Based on our calculations of the project area, there are approximately 187.5 units on this project. If you take 20% of the 1.3 million and do the math on this, it works out to about $1,386 per residential unit, which is what the assessment would be. We did prepare a preliminary assessment roll that's in the detailed report in your packet, and those individual assessments ranged from as low as $693, and those are related to some townhome units that receive less than one ERU, to a maximum of just over 10,000, and that's for a large property, I believe, along River Drive. Somebody that owns a large frontage. The average assessment is about $1,500. And those assessments are eerily similar to what you assessed in 2014 and 2016. So, project schedule, this is also in your packet, but there's a lot of steps in the process for an assessment project, as you know. In August, you authorized the feasibility report. Tonight, we're presenting that report, and the item for your consideration would be to pass a resolution receiving the report and moving on to the next step, which would be the improvement hearing. If you chose to proceed, we would work with staff to publish the notice of hearing on the improvement and mail out notices to all the property owners. And then we would have a neighborhood meeting prior to the improvement hearing, kind of an informal environment where we can meet with property owners, answer questions, a little less intimidating than coming to a council meeting at a hearing and having to ask questions. We'd try to do that on the 30th of October, and then the improvement hearing will be held on November 1st at your November meeting. And that's where you would consider whether you choose to proceed with the project and move on to the design phase. prepare plans and specs and bid the project and proceed forward. Conclusion, our conclusion after looking at the project area, the improvements are necessary, they're cost effective, and they're feasible. And that feasibility is contingent on your determination as a city council on the respect to financing the project, whether that's feasible or not. Our recommendation would be accept the report, call for a hearing on the improvements to receive input from the property owners. That's all I've got. Questions?
When you made your estimate, you estimated the asphalt at $82 a ton. Now we're gonna have, Highway 60 is gonna be overlaid at the same time. Highway 61 is gonna be worked on with asphalt, possibly Grant Boulevard too. With all those projects, do you think there's a possibility of a portable plant coming in to this area?
Tony and I've talked about that. I wouldn't count on that driving the $82 a ton price down at all. But yeah, it's a possibility with all that work. Hopefully you'll get a competitive bid. We hope for more than one.
That was one reason why we had went with a little bit bigger project in 2019, was hoping to get some economies of scale there.
And you reminded me I should talk about the grant, so.
We still got the grant pending for 8th Street.
We submitted a local road improvement grant for 8th and Allegheny, and actually for a portion of 12th, and actually an extension of 12th to take 12th even further. You weren't selected in the first round of that, but our understanding is MnDOT is still considering projects that were previously submitted and denied for funding with some additional dollars that came through this last session. So we haven't heard on that yet, but if that comes through,
That would only
that
be upside.
would be a help. So
One thing that,
Tony's gonna correct everything I said wrong right now. So.
I don't get paid the big bucks.
No.
One thing that might come into play too is some of the people that paid for the streets to be done, you know, if they're within 10 years, then if they're on a corner lot. So I don't know, might save a few calls tomorrow, but I don't know if you send letters out to those differently or
Well,
not.
no, and actually we haven't done that level of analysis with this assessment roll yet, so this is preliminary. We would look at that with the final assessments, but certainly if the people who have the assessments on their lots are the ones who are most aware of that, so we actually want to hear from them. So if folks that come to the meetings and are aware that they were assessed within the last 10 years, they should let us know so we can make sure we take note of that and make those adjustments on the final assessment roll. So.
Questions? Further questions? All right, council, then I would like a motion adopting the resolution, which is included, receiving the feasibility report and calling for a hearing on the proposed 2019 street improvements.
So moved.
I'll second.
Further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. That passed unanimously. Department of Homeland Security is item number 2 under general business. FEMA Firefighters Assistant Grant Acceptance.
Darren's coming forward. The city applied through FEMA for a grant for air packs. He'll get into some details on what those are. We actually enlisted the help of a grant writer that helped us a little bit on this, but in the end, we received over $100,000 grant for these air packs that we had put in the capital improvement plan over the next several years to start replacing them. So Darren, get into it.
That's about the gist of it, though. So I don't really have to say a whole lot here, but yeah, we were told in 2013 that the air packs we were currently using were no longer going to be made and equipped, so the parts for them started to become scarce, and they said by 2018, 19, that they would have to be replaced. And so for the last 3 years, we've been kind of pushing around to see what our options are and putting money aside for this. And this Assistance to Firefighters Grant is a FEMA grant, and it's issued all over the United States. It's not just a Minnesota grant, but it's like $312 million that are given out to local fire departments and that to help to assist with certain things like this. So we had applied for it before a couple times, and filling out the paperwork, the binders, the paper, the stuff got to be pretty lengthy. Well, at one of the conferences I was at, I ran into a grant writer from New York, and we just happened to be talking a little bit. He wasn't looking for work, and I happened to squeeze in under his work. So basically, through some communications with him, I was able to have him write our grant for us, and it paid off. And I think he has a pretty high success rate in this field, and that's all he does is write these firefighter grants. So he's definitely on board with the city of Wabasha. I'm going to continue to write this grant every year for different type of merchandise and stuff for the fire department. And just because you get it 1 year doesn't mean that you're thrown out of the books for 2 or 3 years. You can actually get this thing. I ran into a couple departments at a couple conferences that have got this grant 6, 7 years in a row. And so I think we're on the right track here, but I think this is going to replace 15 of our air packs, that's what total we have on all of our trucks in our station with top of the line new equipment. So it's a huge deal for us at the fire department to our air packs, our SCBAs, which are air tanks on our backs. The whole setup is when you're fighting a fire, that's everything. So it means a lot to know that we have new equipment, and it's top of the line stuff. So it kind of gives you a little bit more sense of security when you are definitely fighting that situation. So other than that, that's all I really got. Just wanted to, I guess that acceptance has to be here today or whatever. I guess the $101,429, the city's contribution, or the city's paid that is $5,000. So that's where I'm at.
So the ones that you're getting rid of, how old are those?
About 13 years old. But I don't know, you think of them as being they should be able to outlive that, but the electronics on them, the beating that they take, and nowadays they want everything washed and cleaned and be able to take all these things apart to clean them, and so the new technology is the way to go. I mean, we gotta go with that type of equipment. So, but if you look at some of the equipment we got on there, yeah, they're burned, they're stained, they've been used. So, but as for us in the fire department, it's we're in a good place right now. So, that's all I got.
Other questions?
My only comment is that, I was wondering, what are we buying here? That was my main question. And I had to plow through it and finally dug it out that there's an SCBA, which I figured must be scuba minus underwater.
Yeah.
And
that one.
and I divided 7,000 into 105 and came up with 15. I thought, okay, so we must be buying 15 breathing apparatus.
Yes, that's yeah.
And I had to dig through 11 pages of FEMA garbage before I finally got that. So I just think, maybe just a little bit of explanation in the front of what we're doing here.
I could have put that out there too, I guess. But
But think how informed you are now, Craig. You can walk down the street and somebody can ask you a question, and you don't have to say, I don't know.
Totally confused now.
That's worth something, isn't it?
and on a different note, kind of the same type of thing, is next week's Fire Prevention Week, of course. So I invite council and a few people down. It's on Wednesday, October 10th. Seems like there's a lot of stuff happening that night. But 5 to 7:30, we have an open house at the fire hall, and the ambulance is going to be set up in there and doing some blood pressures and showing off some of their stuff there. But come down there, do a walkthrough, show you what an SCBA is.
Yeah.
Definitely would like your presence down there to, support the fire department.
Yeah, the ambulance shows up down there and it's crickets and the line's out the door for the fire truck. Every year. It definitely draws them in. Well, we go out to the schools, and I think, we have 15 guys that help out on that day, that Wednesday, and we spend 3 hours at St. Felix and 3 hours at the public school,
And you fire up these kids to go home to come down the fire hall, it works. So they definitely come. So otherwise, any other questions?
Thank you, well done. Thank you.
Thanks.
Okay, if no more questions, then a motion authorizing the acceptance of the Department of Homeland Security Financial Assistance Firefighters Grant, and also authorizing the expenditure of $5,071.
I'll move.
Second.
Further discussion? Hearing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign, passed unanimously. Request for 2 new cardiac monitors for the Wabasha ambulance.
Gene and Amanda are here to present this. I will say this was an item we've had in the capital improvement plan for several years, and Gene, as well as his predecessors and the entire crew, have done a good job of stretching this out, and it's time. Go forward, Gene.
It is, you know, a little bit, you guys probably got the information in your packets and stuff, but I'll just kind of read through this new cardiac monitors. A little background on our current monitors. You know, they're, from the information what I gathered, you know, Wabasha Ambulance has 2 Zoll E-Series cardiac monitors. They were purchased, refurbished from Zoll back in 2008. So they were already used, but before that, we had 2 monitors from the Plainview ambulance, and you know they were Life Pack 12s, and those were bought used from Plainview also, or they were purchased from Plainview. So exact dates I'm not for sure on with these, because taking over in January, there's not many records out there. Currently, our E-Series monitors, the 2 of them that are used, you know, Wabasha ambulance, they're not functioning in the capacity that they need to be. There's calibration issues. We have, you know, some parts on them that are not being supported anymore from Zoll themselves. The battery packs, for instance, we're scrambling probably weekly to make sure we have the proper, you know, a good battery in there. I think we have 3 now that we're rotating between 2 monitors. So, you know, and then a couple other things. You know, the software in them is outdated. They're more than 10 years old. I know that for these monitors, and you know, and then also the paper that we use for printing out our cardiac artifacts to give to the ER, you know, and stuff like that. They're not making the paper anymore, or anything. There's no parts being made for these devices at all. Last, the monitors, you know, that we use at the Wabasha ambulance. We've had a recommendation. The leadership team has met. We've done a lot of research through Zoll and Physio, the 2 major competitor, you know, they're competitors. And the leadership team that we've met with, and they recommend the Zoll product. It's currently, you know, with the Zoll, it's compatible with a lot of our fellow mutual aid agreements, fellow area ambulance services. What am I trying to say here?
Other towns are using the same.
Yeah, sorry. So, you know, take for instance this, we're getting defibrillators out there in the community. There's old defibrillators. That product will work on these monitors. They'll interchange. So if we're doing a CPR on a patient, we can just take the cables off of their device and plug it right into ours. So, you know, like Chad had said, money has been set aside for a couple of years in the capital plan. You know, we have, with these new monitors, we have improved capabilities to better treat patients, you know, with our 12 leads, looking at the heart and transmitting those to the hospital. There's actually, there was a grant a couple of years ago for the wireless transmission for these to our local hospital. And I do believe it's still sitting out there too that we can use going through the hospital to get to go forth with that grant. But that's just on the transmission side for the wireless transmission. But these are more user-friendly. They're lighter. They're easier on the staff. The current monitors we have are 19 pounds, I think, and these are right at the 10-pound mark. So that way when we're carrying into the house and stuff. But you know, with these new monitors comes, you know, the new softwares. They're going to be these have just, it's not that they just came out, I think they've been out for 2 years now, so software is gonna be readily available, throughout the life of these monitors. Usually we could probably get another 10 to 12 years out of these. So, like I said, the same equipment and then, the wireless transmission. So, waiting is costing us, it can cost, the citizens of the city, because we're not providing that level of care that we need to for our 911 calls. So these monitors are actually used every time we have a call. So, with that, it's a very vital piece of equipment for us down there. So
you're recommending the Zoll?
Zoll, recommending the Zoll product.
6165?
Yep.
It's 64,477, next to the last page is a grand total.
That's the physio, I do believe, the physio
That's
quote.
the physio?
Yep.
Zoll 61,965.
Yep.
Thank you.
So Gene makes a lot of good points. All of our services that we intercept with use Zoll products. They use the same monitor, so as that medic, say, coming from Gold Cross joins our crew to continue patient care, it's a real easy transition because it's the same machine. They don't have to guess what's going on with the different machine. They can just become part of that whole system. You talked about sending the EKGs wirelessly to the hospital, so we can get a physician's comment on those, which may dictate where we might transport somebody, either to a cath lab immediately or to this hospital. Depends, and we want to get someone to a cath lab as quickly as possible. The Zolls are the ones that have been spec'd out for military use. They're designed to get wet, they're designed to get drugged through the sand, they're designed to fall off the back of ambulances, or all that kind of stuff. So they're seem to be the right choice.
So is this in the budget somewhere?
It's in the capital
Improvement.
Has been, actually, so.
Yeah. Since I do believe 2016.
Yep, we pulled it forward.
We've been trying to stretch them as long as we can, so.
Other questions?
Do the local hospitals all support the technology for this, for transferring data?
They support our technology to a point where, say Mayo, for instance, they are, like what John was saying, they use a lot of the same product that we do. Hospitals have a different, some of them go with a physio, like our local hospital here does. They use a physio equipment down here. That's actually, I've been in meetings with them, they're actually looking at trying to change that, because their equipment's coming to their lifespan, the end of their lifespan. So Zoll is leading the technology out there. They have the leading technology out there right now. They have for the last probably 5 to 10 years, they've been leading it. So, but as far as interchanging right now, no. But it doesn't take much to work with this hospital. Our biggest focus is the interchanging with the local services, for our advanced life support services and transports and working with mutual aid. So.
And it's not just cardiac patients that we use these monitors on. Gene said it before that we use it on every single patient we come in contact with, not just every single patient that we transport. So if somebody doesn't want to go to the ambulance, we still assess them. We still get all of their vital information, and that's one piece of equipment that gets used on every single call, whether it's cardiac, whether it's respiratory. It's got some really nice updates on software for end-tidal, so asthma patients, COPD patients. We can carbon monoxide detecting, so if somebody's sick in their house and we don't know why they're sick, we can hook them up and see if there's carbon monoxide in their system. So it's a wide range of uses that we use it for, not just cardiac, which is a big one, of course, it's huge. But like I said, it's on every single patient that we come in contact with that this monitor gets used for.
All right, a motion based on Director Jensen's suggestion that we invest in the Zoll.
So moved.
Second.
Further discussion? All in favor? Aye. Opposed, same sign. That's passed unanimously.
Thank you, council.
Thank you, Gene and Amanda.
All right, return. Item number 4, Parkside Marina lease. John, Chad,
We can start. Do you want to talk about the PowerPoint, or do you want to talk about where we're at first, Jeff, or does it matter?
Doesn't matter.
We've, I guess, a little brief overview, and then maybe you can go through the PowerPoint. We've been in negotiation with the operators of Parkside Marina now for a number of months. The current lease is expired. It expired in April of this year. We've been back and forth. We recognize that we're probably out of balance with the balance of the river valley when it comes to what we charge rents. I think there's some misunderstanding as to what is actually leased down there and what is actually owned down there. This is for a ground lease, essentially the shoreline and the dike. All of the infrastructure, including the docks, all of the power, all of the sewer, water, all, the buildings, everything is owned by the guys that own Parkside Marina, that actually own the marina. So all we're really leasing to them is the ground. Then that's just the shoreline around where the one through.
Includes the area where they store the boats, doesn't it?
Yeah, in the dike up there. So you've got that, the area from essentially the 100 boom out to the well, and then up on the dike, going out to the dike. We have met somewhat regularly with them, trying to come to terms, and we're still kind of far apart as to where we're at. So we're here today to talk about the next steps that the city council can take. We can't do anything, we can't make any decisions or anything tonight. We can set a public hearing so we can make some decisions on what to do at that point. Am I missing anything for kind of the overview?
I think that another point is that this is not just a simple lease. By our city charter, this is a franchise agreement.
Yeah.
So that's what's really going to require a public hearing
That's correct.
and that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
Which is required by charter.
Yes.
Yep.
And it can only go for 10 years, is that correct?
I don't know.
That I don't know.
According to the charter.
What was that, Dean?
According to our charter, can't a franchise only go for 10 years?
I know that's the case for
Number
cable.
offhand, I'll take a look at it.
So what we've done is kind of put together, well, actually Jeff has done a very good job, and with Chad's help, putting together a bit of a PowerPoint, and that's up there right now. It'll help, pictures always help, right? So it'll help to kind of walk through the background as well as kind of where we're at right now. You want to go ahead?
Sure. Basically, we all know the current lease expired this past April. The annual lease payment up to that time was $43,750 a year, and we've been talking. And the city and the marina did agree to an extension of the previous lease to September 30th with a payment of $10,000, and they have paid that money. Just looking back, the next slide is an interesting picture. We've examined comparable lease agreements for municipal harbors that are rented from a city to our operator, from La Crosse to Red Wing. I look at there's number 7 here is the Wabasha. The other ones are anywhere, and all the marinas are basically the same, very similar in size. They're from 150 to 200 slips. There's one small one, that's Alma, but you can see it just seems like there's something out of whack here as far as why this payment was so high.
Are those the total annual
Yes.
payments, including the gas percentage and slip
Not
percentage?
all of them do that. There's a
The
couple.
ones that do, did you include that in
I
there?
had no way to estimate how much gas they sell, or an example of, like, I think Winona, they get 4 cents on a gallon of gas. But you figure you sell, what, 100,000 gallons of gas, that's $4 grand. So it's not that much money. Lacrosse does something weird. They actually put $100 surcharge on out-of-state boats. And then there's different amounts of land that are being leased. I mean, I think one of them, they're leasing 15 acres of land compared to this little thing that we have down here. So it's like I said here, the city lease with Parkside is just land and water. You know, basically, we're pretty much just leasing the easement of the road to allow them to have access to the docks.
It's about 6.6 acres, I think, we're leasing to them.
Well,
We'll, I just ran
yeah.
on the map, and then that's about what it comes to. When you consider all that area that, where the boats
Yeah,
are
well, then
stored.
we're gonna go through you're on the planning commission, we're gonna go through the latest zoning stuff that Christie pulled up on that property too, and there's been changes, it appears to be in the last 10 years, what the zoning is for that property. The only thing we could find out was how this lease amount was, came about was that they decided that the land was $1 million and you can invest it for 4% and get 4%. So that's 40 grand, that's where they started. And I don't know, that's kind of hard to wrap yourself around a little bit right now.
Jeff, this bar graph, is this research done by your committee?
Yes.
Yes, we have copies of all the leases.
Okay.
Went through, read them, and those are, the amounts there are as of at least 2016, because some of them are in flux, you know.
Okay, so these are basically base lease rates?
Well,
and then you've got the different places have different additions?
most of them don't have that. There's only a couple of them that had to really throw out a bunch of extras.
Okay.
But this is pretty much all the land lease. This is the basic land lease. So anyways, if you want to talk about the property impact of these marinas in Wabasha, the lower marina, which is privately owned, they pay a property tax, which is combined, you know, the city, county, and school, of about $31,000 a year. Parkside Marina, with their property that they own there, they're paying $21,000 a year in property taxes. And then I guess we found out the lease that was before 2007 was about $7,000 a year. So somehow between 2007 and 2008, they went from $7,000 a year to $40,000. I guess if we want to look at the zoning information now, any of you guys want to talk about the zoning? You might know more about it than I do.
Well, you can see up here, there's essentially two parcels. And so the red there is general commercial, and that's what's essentially owned by the operators of Parkside Marina. We've got residential conservancy, which kind of runs out there on the point, or the dike, if you will. And then the other one is R2, and that's where the boats are kind of stored in that ring area, right where you're at now.
What bearing does that have on the price of leasing this land?
Well, use, for one.
Well,
And
so you're saying,
well, if you keep
And
going,
also-
you might want to be building buildings on there, or?
But we gotta determine what's this land worth, as an example? What's it worth?
Well, they're not buying it, they're just leasing it.
You're right.
but if you go to the next slide here, I mean, you see it's rated shoreland, so it's really limited in its use. I mean, it's single-family campgrounds or forest, and maximum impervious it can have is 25%. And Chad, I think you said that gravel's considered impervious. So, and then also the DNR added the 50-foot buffers zone that needs to be around the whole thing.
But it works great as a marina. It's all permitted under those, a marina is permitted under all of these.
That's correct.
Yes.
That's correct.
And then there's also the floodplain issue. It's a 100-year floodplain easily, and nothing can be developed there without raising all structures a foot and a half above the base flood elevation. And the bottom line is, we just kind of looked at it and said, there's no way you can call that property worth $1 million when it's really only good for parking boats. And that's the majority of what land is being leased.
Well, if you look at what they appraised it at, and they did appraise a larger area, I just looked at the parcel numbers, and one of the parcels is quite large, goes behind the hospital. That came up to $704,000 on the appraised value.
Appraised or assessed?
Estimated market value.
From the county?
EMV is just,
County.
yes, it's the county.
Okay, that's, yeah.
So, and you might say the the real value might be a little bit over that, who knows? But there is some value out there to that land that they have.
Well,
Even though you can't build on it, or
There's no argument that there isn't value to that land.
There's a value to that land.
So the next part is with the status of negotiations. Our first proposal was $43,000 for the first year as we identify it that the tenant is a holdover tenant, so we would expect that the tenant would pay the continuing amount until we get something satisfied.
John, sorry to interrupt. When you say first year, does that mean 2018?
Yes, this
Okay.
one that we're in right now.
Thank you.
And then years 2 through 5, we suggested $30,000 with a 2% increase. And then that was our first initial one. The marina came back, the operators came back with what you see up there, which is 12.5 for the first 1 through 5, 15 for 6 through 10, 17, 11, going on up. So we came back, and really where our bottom line is, where the committee feels that we could go and be comfortable with and justify, is that 43 for the first and 25,000, 2 through 15, 2 through 10, 2 through 5, whatever it might be, at 25,000. So there's a couple of things that they've been doing on behalf of the city that I think we need to identify and recognize.
What is COW, please?
City of Wabasha.
Oh.
I thought that might get the question.
So one of the things, there's a couple things that they do on behalf or for the city. One is they manage the storage, manage the installation, and removal of the city dock and the storage of that, as well as provide a lift slip for the fireboat. So the slip's worth about $2,000 to $2,500 a year, because it's a lift, and then the dock removal, storage, and installation is probably worth about $4,000. So we're looking at probably $8,000 of in-kind service that they provide the city on an annual basis.
You're on the next sheet?
I can go there, yep, right there.
John, this is kind of a new
8,000.
concept, isn't it? This is a new item or a new issue, the in-kind. I don't remember it coming up in the last 10 years.
No, they've just been doing it. They've been doing it on behalf of the city.
They've been doing it,
Yeah.
right.
They've just been doing it, and they recognize that there's well, it's an expense to them, certainly.
Yeah.
Could you review what that was again?
So the removal, storage, and installation of the city dock,
Okay,
okay? As well as then a slip and it's a lift slip, so it's got a float for the fireboat. We have a rescue boat. So, and to make it easy, $4,000 and $2,000 in value. So, with the city's proposal, a 10-year agreement we'd get about $359,000. With theirs, with that in-kind, their last offer, which was increased, is $313,000, and that includes that in-kind service. So that's where we're at, and the committee, and I think that the marina operators feel as though they've given it their best, and this is their best offers at this point.
What are we paying for in-kind right now, what we have been in the last 10 years?
Nothing.
That's been included in that.
They've just been doing it.
I think it, actually, I think in the lease, it was, the city dock was included.
Was it?
Yes.
Yeah, it is.
So at this point, I have some other ideas, some other things too that need to be brought up. The current owners of the marina were in the midst of buying the marina when the last lease was negotiated. They weren't involved in lease negotiations. They received that lease as part of the purchase package. They've reached out to the city early on and essentially said, well, we're locked into this lease this time, and that's where we're at.
Well, that franchise agreement is, if they sell, it can be passed on to the next owner?
It needs to be approved by council.
Yeah, I thought there was yeah, okay.
Yep.
So, our options are continue with lease negotiations based on what we just talked about. We could start an eviction process, or we can discuss alternatives, either the purchase of the marina or maybe the sale of our land to them. I mean, I guess there's all those different options. Our committee was directed to essentially negotiate the new lease. We can't make any decision tonight. We've got to do a public hearing to make a decision on what to do or where to go from here.
Well, I know it was the public that took it from 7,000 up to 43, because they didn't feel that 7,000 was appropriate. And that's why it went up to 43, and I don't know who was on that committee. I don't remember back then, but I would have a hard time selling it to the community of going lesser than this, telling our taxpayers that they have to make up the difference somewhere. So,
and I appreciate what you're saying, but I also look at it as, you know, we are the city of Wabasha. There's not a lot of critical factors that make that location better than the Pepin location or Red Wings location, you know, in population density and access, in wave protection, in ice protection, or all those different things, and services provided. It's almost apples to apples in a lot of ways.
Until Pepin comes up for renewal in 2 years and they decide to go 43,000.
Well, we
we're behind
can't
the game.
dictate that. You know, we know what they've been
I'm
doing
just
for
saying,
years on
so.
end, you know what I mean? And we know what's been palatable in the area for that much time. I think that there's a benefit. I think that Wabasha as a community and as a setting is probably nicer, at least in my opinion, than maybe the others, but maybe that's more of an emotional attitude rather than actual something that's actual.
Were you guys able to look at the revenue and their expenses and?
No, we were able to, you know, we can certainly, you can make some assumptions based on slip occupancy and what they charge and those sorts of things. Now, we can't do that, of course, we don't know what revenues are at these other marinas. We can do the same thing, you know, based on occupancy and what they would charge. And all of it's pretty much the same. I know that it's competitive, you know, slip rents throughout the region.
Well, you guys have done a lot of work here, and I really appreciate it. I know, and you probably say where it is kind of like comparing apples to oranges in some of these places, because they're all different in a lot of ways. But I'm wondering, there's such a cost difference. You know, at least 62,000 one way, and even more than if you look at it other ways. Is there an appraiser around that we can get that specializes in marinas that could give us an idea what it really is worth?
Well, I think those are all possibilities. No, we aren't, the committee's not, the committee's kind of done its work, right? So the next step is, and we would have to talk about this, I don't know if we can make these decisions right now. You know, if we continue negotiations, but we need to garner more information, such as paying for an appraisal. You know what I mean? Because that's what we'd have to do.
Right, we'd have to pay for it.
Yeah, I mean, but that would be the cost, that would be a cost that would be incurred.
Yeah, I don't know how much that is, but, you know, it may pay for itself and it may not.
Well, the current operators have decided, you know, they've said they're flat out refusing to pay the $43,750 going forward. So we're in that rock and a hard place, you know. So, like I said, our other options are going to be either looking at buying the marina, or looking at I don't know what else. Like I said, we're in a.
What about this suggestion that we put it out for bids?
But what?
That's
what
a franchise too. We're
So
getting
yeah.
Got to get the. We've talked to the attorney a little bit about this, and the franchise issue make things a little more complicated. I mean,
and then there's a whole infrastructure, isn't there?
yeah,
So
we don't own the
everything-
dock. Yeah,
Yeah,
we don't
everything
own
out
anything
there
but
is
land.
owned by Parkside.
Yeah, including the buildings.
The buildings are,
Well, that's
yeah.
their
The
where the
docks.
docks are, the fuel
All the
dock.
infrastructure, the fuel dock, the fuel tanks, the well,
Right.
the lifts, all that stuff is owned by Parkside.
Yeah, you can't put that out for proposal,
There's
that's
nothing
nonsense.
Well, it's
yeah,
their
there's nothing
stuff.
there,
There's
is there,
nothing
you
to.
know? I mean,
You can't.
So, you know, and we got one other issue here too that we gotta remember, is we've got employees there that have been longtime community members. And we got 190, 200 people that rent slips there and have for years on end. They're kind of a part of this community, if either they live here or they're here every weekend. So, you know, we've got a responsibility to them too, don't we? Well, at least I see it that way. I understand coming from the operator's sense that they think they're paying too much and they refuse to pay that much. I do.
What if they raise their slip fees? What if they raise
They're competitive. The people just move to another marina. People, the consumer's sensitive to cost. You know, if it's gonna cost $1,000 here to rent a slip and it's gonna cost $800 in Alma, they're gonna go to Alma. That's the way it is. That's,
Yeah, I just have a hard time putting this on the backs of the taxpayers or taking it out of our reserves. That's,
well, it's
that's a
not really
cost.
taking anything out. It's still money would be coming in regardless.
So I guess.
less money would be coming in.
You know, and so then the question is, you know, so let's suggest that they've been overpaying for the last 10 years, right? So we've gotten $430,000 from $400 whatever $1,000 from them, right? Already, and if they've been paying 25% more than they should have, or if they've been paying 50% more than they should have, then we've already collected.
I'd be careful
You know,
with saying more than you should have.
well, I don't, you know what I'm saying? My point to that is that if,
I've heard the other way too, that they were ready to sign for even higher, and it got knocked down by certain people.
Nobody here.
yeah. That's absolutely not.
They're here, we could ask them if they were gonna
Yeah.
sign for higher. Didn't hear the question.
Any council member can invite someone to the podium.
Sure.
The question, if you guys wanna come up. The question was, were you compelled to maybe sign for more to, or lose the marina?
10 years ago.
We didn't have anything to do with it 10 years ago.
Okay, so that answers that question.
We had no negotiation with it.
We didn't own it, so we couldn't.
Yeah, the
They
former
weren't
owner.
even invited to sit in, they couldn't even
Well,
sit in.
so in 2008, you didn't sign that lease? That was somebody else?
That's correct.
Previous owners,
How many slips you got down there?
roughly.
You had
shy of 200.
I figured 192 or so.
So basically, the city's getting $226 per slip. What do you charge per slip?
All different.
Everyone varies.
I did some calculations.
Yeah.
My wife and I walked the docks in June, on the middle of the week, a rotten day, no cars there, Every boat that was in there should have been there. They were about 72% occupancy. My boat's on the 400 slip, and they listed the slip rental rates for the 3, 4, and 500 boom. So you can do an easy calculation, because those are pretty much all the same. Like, I think it was like $12.50, and then the 1 and 200 docks. I just estimated. I didn't know what those were, so I just estimated 30-foot boats and say $3,000 a slip. Probably low. I came up with about 300, and on April 15th, if everybody paid their rent, they would have like about $340,000 cash in the bank from the number of boats there. So that's what it is. I mean, and every other marina is going to be the same way.
John, go ahead.
I was just gonna ask, I believe in one of our sit-downs, did you guys offer to show?
Yes.
Yeah, we haven't gotten that far.
I just wanted to make that point. They've been more than gracious in offering their books or whatever to us to show us. And I know they've made a lot of investments in the marina over the last 10 years. I mean, I personally can identify a lot of improvements. And I suppose,
yeah,
you know, so it's not like the money's going out of town, it's going back in.
No, absolutely, it's not going out of town. I agree with that. And it's a nice little community that we have down there.
Yeah, it really is.
So John, this minute, 10/2/18, we have no lease, they have no lease.
That's correct.
That's correct.
And we're apart.
Okay, and we're apart. My big concern, John, I like the PowerPoint. Why didn't I have it in April?
Well, we weren't ready in April.
Pardon me?
We weren't ready in April.
Yeah, and why?
Just weren't.
We weren't ready. This is where we're at today.
I understand that. I'm gonna still go back and say, it would be nice to have had this, because there was a year to negotiate.
Well,
and
actually, they were under the impression they had 2 years to negotiate.
So
Isn't that
there's-
correct? Isn't that what
yeah.
your lawyer said?
And so we got the problem is, you know, there's a lot of gray with all of that. What they've perceived is they've had about 2 years, they've got a 2-year window to negotiate this.
where did that come from?
Conversation with their attorney.
And we maybe see it in the
So,
council.
the whole, I don't know where we'd be, I don't know if we'd be anywhere different if we'd started any earlier or any later. I really don't. You know. You know, I think that Jeff and I maybe even took more latitude than we probably should have, and being willing to, you know, suggest a lower rate, recognizing that would be, that's about all we've got to do here, being competitive in the market. And we're still off.
What was your number again? Your last offer?
I can put it up, Dean.
Yeah, I don't have my glasses, so.
Oh, you need it read? It was, this year, 20,000, and then 18,000 for the next 5, and 23,000 for the next 5,
Okay, I got it here.
with the 8,000 in kind.
So they're at 313, and we're at 359. Now, we did not include the in-kind in ours, which I suppose we should, so you could add that in there.
Actually, I did.
Did you?
Yeah, it's added in.
Okay, sorry.
In the total lease plus in-kind last column.
Oh, sorry.
That's where the 359 came from.
So we're looking at about a 51% decrease, according to my St. Felix math. And
Well, we were at 43 and now we're going to 18, that's even more, so.
That's where they're at right now.
Yeah, and I'm not, I see the in-kind 8,000, I'd have to see more stats on that to be able to buy that. Might be true, you know, I'm just saying. That's a number just posted up there and I don't know where it came from. You've told me, but I'd have to see some stuff.
John, being this is gonna go to a public hearing, and I know that we can have 30 people back there screaming and yelling, and it won't make any difference because the votes around this table. But I believe that it would make sense that we get a campaign to inform the public. I believe they have it coming. When we drop this revenue, and we talk about revenue, and we talk about alternative sources of revenue, and John, for me, this kind of came out of the woodwork, dropping from 43 to 25 is a number I heard at a port authority. That's a big drop. And I think that if we're going to try and sell this with benefits, we need to have some kind of campaign.
So do we want to schedule a public hearing?
Pardon me?
Should we schedule a public hearing, do you think? Should that be our next step?
We're gonna have to. I mean, we're running without a lease now. If we want a lease.
Well, they want a lease as well. They want.
But there were a couple other alternatives here that are options. John?
If we consider those options, we'd still have to do a public hearing.
Absolutely,
To get
you're right.
direction to consider those options or pursue those options.
Yeah. And from my position, the sooner the better. How about you gentlemen?
Yes.
How do you feel about running without a lease?
Well, we need to get our work done and get the boats out of the water for our customers, for sure.
Yeah.
And they've got, I mean, and so the boats are coming out of the water, and you're gonna be sending out or looking at putting out contracts for next year.
Correct.
You got winter work to book, all these different things. I mean, it's part of just doing business. So, they want a lease.
Absolutely.
They need a lease to stay, so that customers can trust that they're gonna be here. We're gonna keep the place open.
And I think because this is public money we're dealing with, and it's a big difference in cost, I'd really like to see if we can get some type of professional appraisal of what that marina is worth. And I know you guys did your homework, and it's hard to maybe compare. I don't know how possible it is to do it, but there must be somebody somewhere out there.
Yeah, I'm sure there is. We can figure that out.
And I think that would be due diligence for the public, that, okay, here's what the professional says it's worth.
But we can't make that decision to do that tonight.
No, we
Right.
can set a public hearing date.
I don't know if we need the public hearing to order an appraisal. And what's gonna be the overall purpose of the public hearing? What's gonna be the outcome?
Satisfy this?
But we haven't even agreed to anything to have a public hearing about. Isn't that the key thing here?
So, and Ron, I think you make a point. So if we want to inform the public, the community, then we need to maybe have an appraisal done so we can inform the community what it's really worth, because we're kind of being nebulous on that number.
I think appraisal, I have no idea what something like that would cost, but it would be worth looking at. But eviction process, eliminate that altogether, I would hope. Sale, I'd be willing to look at that. They already own everything.
Everything but the, yeah, I know.
But the water.
Yeah.
Then this wouldn't be an argument for the next 200 years, every 10 years.
We just have to argue on taxes then.
Just kidding. I'm just kidding.
And talk about number one, negotiations. We're at 43, they're at 22, 20,
18.
28, something like that. Maybe we can come closer to those numbers in the meantime.
Would you guys, is purchasing the property, is that a possibility, you think?
We said yes.
Yes, that was talked about, but we felt it was out of scope for this committee. This committee wasn't asked to sell the property, we were asked to do the lease.
So if you wanna make a motion, direct the committee to go ahead and get a appraisal done, to kind of package that property as a value, so they can make a determination if they wanna buy it, we can then provide the public with what it's worth, which would help us either up and down on this lease number. It would be helpful.
I'll make a motion that we get an appraisal for the purpose of leasing the property and for the purpose of selling the property.
One entity should own the whole thing. The current situation is bizarre, to say the least. And, you know, if these boys aren't making the kind of money they ought to make there, then something's wrong. You know, it's no different than Coffee Mill Gulf a few years back got taxed right out of business. And, you know, and if we're leasing them out of business, if it's no fun for them to operate that business, then why do they want to do it? But they're stuck now because they have to have that property from us. It's just a bad situation. One entity needs to own the whole thing.
And we have to have them for our
Well, exactly. It's bad. It's just bad. Figure out a selling price and sell it to them, and be done with it forever.
Well, we can certainly start with getting an appraisal, and then we'll have to go to a public hearing and decide what we can do with it.
With the understanding we keep the launch on that side.
We'll go.
And
we'll cross that
maintain it.
No. We'll cross that bridge then.
It's got some bad blacktop from
Yeah.
the flood, so we might wanna be careful there.
So there's a motion, right? Is there a second? I'm not comfortable making that second.
Second.
There you go.
By the way, Dean, the maximum franchise term is 25 years.
25. Really? Wow.
The previous owners had those 25 years.
All right, and who's going to take
All the other marinas.
charge of setting up the appraisal?
What, I'm sorry, Ron?
I say, who's in charge of setting up the appraisal?
Committee?
You will?
Yep.
Okay.
You wanna come back with who the appraiser is, or occasions or whatever, something like that?
Yeah.
You can get two.
Oh, we'll probably get 2 bids. Yeah. Then go from there. Get kind of a profile on them. So there isn't been a vote, right?
There's been a motion and a second.
To get an appraisal.
To get an appraisal.
For selling the property.
We need to call the question for the motion in the second.
The motion was?
Get an appraisal to appraise the property for leasing and for selling.
And the second was by whom? Dean? Okay. Further discussion? I will say that once you sell property, it's gone forever.
It is.
So, that's my comment. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Passed unanimously. Item number 5, Board of Appeal open book discussion. Sue, I'll bet you're up on that as anyone, huh?
Well, at our last Board of Appeal, Penny Schmidt had approached the board and asked if we would consider the open book concept. So we told her to send us information and the council would look it over. So the assessor sets the date for all the cities and townships, whether it's a local board or if it's an open book. And then the upside to the open book concept is they can meet with the assessor without it being public in front of their neighbors or whatever. So it's more of a private. They still can appeal to the county board and they take it to the state if they so wish, if they're not happy.
When we did our studying, the open book information was included, and I wondered, why don't we do that? Do it that way.
The only thing I noticed when I was reading through the statutes that Penny said we should look at, it talked about city charters, and our charter does say we have a board. So I think we'll have to talk to our attorney. Is it something that we still can pass on to the county? If our charter says we have the board, so.
There are becoming many issues in that charter that need to be looked at, and I would hope as soon as possible.
So we can put this on the November agenda?
For this?
If council so chooses, I can get, Attorney Flaherty's opinion on that, and then you can make your decision whether you want to continue with your local board or move it to an open book.
There you go.
Because we have to let the assessor know by
I'm just gonna say, I have some reservations about that, because on the local board, at least you have your local citizens, your local city people listening to your appeal. When you go to the open book, you've got the county assessor who did the assessment and the appraisal, and so you're gonna talk to those people, and then if you don't like what they say, then you appeal to the county board, who may or may not want to back up their county employees. And that's, I think that you're kind of limiting yourself as to who your advocates are. So that's a thought I have.
I would agree.
But if we can do it, you can do it just for 3 years, right? If you do agree it, you can take it back to the city in 3 years, so it may be a worthwhile experiment, I don't know.
Let's look at it.
What's the maximum we've ever
Okay,
had
so
on those things?
we're gonna move that forward to
How
November.
many people have we really had? Half a dozen?
It depends. One year we
Two.
had a lot. Some years we've had nothing. Some years we've had 1 or 2.
It all depends.
All over the board.
All over the board, it's really.
My observation, John, it depends. If your tax bill goes up, you're gonna show up.
Sometimes at the wrong meeting. Yeah, sometimes at the wrong meeting.
Yeah.
Unfortunately.
Can we get that charter put on our website?
I think it is already.
is, yeah.
It is, yep.
Okay,
We do need to reorganize all that though, Dean.
we're going to make a decision on that in our November meeting, so we'll move on. Reschedule the November council meeting due to November 6th general election, so I think I saw a suggestion that that'd be November 1st.
Right.
Yep. Straw poll said everyone was okay. You guys everyone's still okay with that?
Except for me.
Except for you, yep.
I'm good. So a motion to set that for November 1st?
I'll move.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed, same sign, passed unanimously. And then we are looking at special council meeting to canvass the November 6th, and I don't know if I saw a date. Friday the 16th.
Yeah, we just need minimum of 4 people to come. That'll be a 30-second meeting.
Right.
What time of day are you thinking?
It can be, is there any
You
limit?
can go in the morning, whatever you want.
Could be
That won't
first
all
thing,
night.
yeah.
I think we've done 7 before on something like that.
7 would be perfect time of day for me.
Me too.
Yep.
I can make 7.
What's the date for that?
16th.
11/16, yep.
November 16th. Got it.
Well, we can do anything within there. We can do the 9th too if we want. Anybody have any preference? What do you want,
Any
Sue?
day at 7 is fine with me.
You want more
I
time?
can't
to-
make it at 7.
No,
Everything?
and I might have it by Friday morning on the 9th, actually.
Dean, you know you cannot be here, right?
Then let's do the 16th.
Is there anyone else that knows they cannot make it?
I
So
can't make it.
you're out, so,
Talking the canvassing.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yep.
so the 5 of us, 4 will have to show up.
If there's a problem, let us know. Yeah. We'll figure it out. So we'll go for the 16th. That'll give us, then it's not urgent.
Ruby, we're doing okay, and I think I'm not going to owe you cookies, but I do want to say that we have an election coming up in the great state of Minnesota, which will once again end up the top state in the union as far as percentage of voters. And I hope that Wabasha will top the state percentages. The ballots are available right now at the courthouse, I believe.
They are.
Pre-voting, and then on the 6th, so we have plenty time, we have ample time to get our vote in. And Gary, you'll remember that, right? All right, moving on to resolution accepting donations. Brian, would you help us out on that one?
Sure. All right, accepting donations. Oh, that is not the right sheet. Hang on. Got it in my file here. Okay. The library, $205 in memory of B. Leckler and by Dalen and Helen Hartzell, Mike Reister, Marianne Carr, Dave Kennebeck, Sandy and Bart Teisman, Todd and Kate Smith, Ben and Dan, I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing that correctly, Residence Council Care Center, $100 to the library in memory of B. Leckler and Don Yarlemick, $20 library in memory of B. Leckler by Mike and Deb Smith, $20 to the library in memory of B. Leckler by Pete and Eileen Johnson, $100 to the library from Steve and Carol Scott. The following all Christmas decorations, $100 James and Cindy Polliard, 1875-07 Backwaters Rowing Club, $500 from M. Scott and Robin Waltney? Walton? Waltney. Okay, that's what I thought. 100 from Kathy Garrity and 100 from Paul Gens and Micah Anderson Gens.
Motion to accept?
So moved.
Second. All in favor?
Aye.
Other announcements? Motion to adjourn? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Passed unanimously.